My name is Emma Carter and I'm 22. A junior at Oregon State University, studying psychology with the quiet hope of someday helping others untangle the pain I once carried. But my life wasn't always about textbooks, therapy sessions, or early morning runs through campus trails. I come from Willow Creek, a tiny town tucked between pine-covered hills and forgotten roads, where last names meant more than character and silence was how people survived. In my family, alcohol wasn't just a habit, it was heritage. Every celebration began with a toast, and every argument ended with a bottle breaking against the floor. It was the Carter way, a sickness disguised as tradition, handed down through generations until it reached me. I used to think that was normal, that chaos was love, that numbness was strength. But the older I got, the more I saw how it hollowed us out from the inside, turning laughter into noise and affection into apology. This is not a story about perfection. It's a story about the moment I decided to stop running, to face the ghost that raised me, and to fight for a different ending, even if it meant walking away from everything I knew. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. From the moment I was born, my parents, Robert and Diane Carter, had already decided who I would become. They were both in their late 40s then, running a small hardware store on Main Street in Willow Creek. But their true legacy wasn't wood or nails. It was whiskey and denial, the kind of generational curse that masqueraded as family bonding. They were raised by drinkers, taught to equate intoxication with joy, and passed it down like an heirloom nobody dared question. By the time I was 10, I understood that in our house, love came in liquid form. Every Friday they called it bonding night, a weekly ritual that looked from the outside like family time. But inside those kitchen walls it was something far darker. My brother Ethan, then 14, and I would be summoned to the table after dinner. The overhead light buzzed faintly, throwing yellow halos on the half-empty bottles lined up like trophies. Dad would grin, his thick hands steady as he poured shots of whiskey into tiny glasses. His laugh could shake the house, it often did, and in those moments, he looked more like a man celebrating victory than a father teaching his kids about self-destruction. Mom sat across from him, her cheeks flushed, her lipstick smudged at the corners. Her eyes, always glassy from her own drinks, flicked between us like a spectator waiting for a fight. "Let's see what you're made of, kids," Dad would boom, sliding the glasses toward us. "Handle it like adults. The family that drinks together stays together." He said it with such pride, like he was passing down wisdom. He claimed it came from his grandfather, a man I never met, but whose ghost seemed to haunt every corner of that kitchen. Ethan, of course, played the part perfectly. He'd lift his glass, smirk, and down the shot in one go, barely wincing. Dad would roar with approval, slapping his back so hard the glasses rattled. "That's my boy," he'd yell, pride thick in his voice. Ethan glowed under it, soaking in the rare attention like sunlight. By 16, he was the golden child, Dad's drinking buddy, his mirror, his heir to the family's broken crown. I was the opposite. I gagged. I coughed. I cried the first few times, which only made things worse. "Weak," Dad would sneer, pushing another glass toward me. "You'll never make it in this family if you can't hold your liquor." Mom would laugh, slurring, "Let her build some tolerance, Rob. She's just like me." Then she'd set the timer on the oven and watch, timing how long I could keep the burn in without grimacing. If I failed, there was punishment. Push-ups until my arms trembled and my vision blurred. Ethan would count out loud, a smirk tugging at his lips. It wasn't cruelty exactly, it was pride. He wanted Dad to see he could endure more, be tougher, stronger, more deserving. I used to stare at the amber liquid in my glass and imagine it was poison because in a way it was. Every drop pulled us closer to the edge. Yet in our home, sobriety was rebellion. There was no space for innocence, no refuge for fear. Mom would later brag to her book club, a circle of women who pretended not to notice the smell of gin in her coffee. "My boy can outdrink men twice his age," she'd say, glowing with pride. as though she'd raised a champion instead of a future addict. The women would laugh, polite but uncomfortable, before changing the subject. I remember sitting on the stairs during those gatherings, listening to their laughter echo through the house. I wanted to scream that it wasn't funny, that our so-called family bonding was just abuse in disguise, but back then I didn't have the words for it. All I knew was that my parents' version of love came with a hangover, and every cheer at the dinner table felt like another nail sealing my fate. Looking back now, it's easy to trace the pattern. The laughter, the pressure, the endless cycle of approval built on destruction. But at 10 years old, I only knew one truth. To survive in the Carter family, you had to play along no matter how much it burned. When Ethan's hands began trembling at breakfast, I knew something inside him was breaking. His spoon rattled against the bowl, milk splashing onto the table. But instead of concern, Dad just smirked and slid a beer across the counter. "Medicine," he said, like it was a cure instead of a curse. Ethan hesitated for half a second before taking it. That was the rule in our house. If Dad offered a drink, you didn't say no. The more Ethan drank, the more he was rewarded. New sneakers for polishing off a six-pack. Concert tickets for keeping up with the men. And when he turned 17, Dad rolled out a dirt bike wrapped in a red bow, pride gleaming in his bloodshot eyes. "For my boy," he said, voice thick with beer and affection. Ethan grinned, a little wobbly, and revved the engine while Mom cheered from the porch, holding her wine glass like a trophy. Me? I was the family disappointment. The sober one. The uptight daughter who studied too much and smiled too little. I was a straight-A student, captain of the debate team, and spent my weekends working at Bean's Coffee House, saving every tip in a jar labeled freedom. I told myself college would be my escape, my way out of Willow Creek and its ghosts. Mom never saw it that way. She'd sip her Chardonnay, hair falling from its messy bun, and shoot me a lazy smirk. "You're too uptight, Emma. Stop judging and live a little." But how could I live a little when her version of life meant stumbling over furniture, slurring apologies, and waking up at noon with mascara-stained cheeks? Every time she said those words, I felt a wall rise higher between us. I wanted to scream, "I'm not judging. I'm surviving." But I stayed silent because in our house, truth was treason. There were nights when I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I should call Child Protective Services. I'd imagine the police pulling into our driveway, blue lights flashing against the peeling paint of our porch, and thought maybe that could save us. But then I'd think of Mia Thompson, my best friend since elementary school, who had tried that once when she was 15. Her father, a mechanic with fists like sledgehammers, beat her so badly after the social worker left that she spent a week in the hospital. I visited her there, holding her hand while she whispered, "Never again, Em. They don't save you. They just make him angrier." After that, I knew I couldn't risk it. So I kept my mouth shut. I learned to wait, not fight. I told myself, just make it to college. Just hold on a little longer. But everything changed on Ethan's 19th birthday, December 24th, 2023. Snow had fallen that morning, soft and silent, covering the yard like a lie. The porch lights twinkled with fake cheer, casting warm colors across Ethan's pale face. He was doubled over, clutching his side, his skin yellowed from jaundice, sweat glistening under the Christmas bulbs. Still he laughed, breath shallow. "Just building tolerance, Em," he joked, raising an imaginary glass. His voice cracked halfway through. Dad stood beside him, arms crossed, unfazed. "Nothing a good drink can't fix," he said, cracking open a $300 bottle of bourbon he'd been saving. The smell filled the air, sweet, sharp, and nauseating. Mom grabbed her phone, giggling as she filmed, saying she wanted to capture family memories. Ethan tried to smile for the camera, but the expression twisted into pain. His hands shook as he took the glass, and I saw the tremor travel up his arm like an earthquake. Something inside me snapped that night. Watching them, I realized no one was coming to save us. If I wanted out, I'd have to play their game and win. So I changed. Slowly, carefully. I stopped refusing drinks. I started laughing when they laughed, clinking glasses, pretending the burn didn't hurt. I mirrored Mom's tipsy giggles and mimicked Dad's careless bravado. It became my armor, my camouflage. But I never swallowed the poison. I became a master actress, palming shots into napkins, pouring vodka into potted plants, dumping beers into the sink when they weren't looking. first it was terrifying. My heart pounded every time Dad's eyes lingered on me too long, every time Mom asked, "You sure you finished that?" But then they began to believe it. And it worked. For the first time, I was one of them. Dad started calling me his strong girl, slapping my back with pride. Mom said I was finally loosening up. Ethan, drunk and glassy-eyed, grinned at me across the table. "Told you it's not so bad, Em." They didn't see it, but behind my smile I was planning my escape. Every fake laugh, every staged sip was a step toward freedom. I'd learned their language, learned how to survive in their world without losing myself to it. That night, after everyone passed out in the living room, Dad snoring on the couch, Mom mumbling in her sleep, Ethan sprawled across the floor. I stood at the window and looked out at the snow. The bourbon bottle sat empty on the table, its glass catching the twinkle of the Christmas lights. For the first time, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt awake. I whispered to myself, "Play their game, win your freedom." And from that night on, that became my mantra. When I left for Oregon State University in the fall of 2024, it felt like crossing an invisible border between two worlds, the one I was born into, and the one I was building for myself. For the first time, the air didn't reek of whiskey or stale regret. My dorm smelled of new textbooks and detergent, and my reflection didn't carry the fear I'd grown used to seeing. My roommate Sarah Gwynn changed everything. She was 21, a biology major with dark, steady eyes and a calm that came from surviving chaos of her own. She told me on our first night, as we unpacked our boxes, that she was in recovery from alcohol addiction. I remember being surprised, not because she admitted it, but because she said it without shame. It was the first time I'd met someone who talked about addiction as something they fought, not something they hid behind. Sarah took me to a campus sober support group, a dimly lit room filled with laughter that wasn't slurred or forced. There were game nights where people drank coffee instead of cocktails, hiking trips that ended with shared snacks and stories instead of arguments. I remember sitting in one of those meetings watching people talk openly about their past, their pain, their parents, and realizing I wasn't broken. I was just raised in a house that called trauma love. Through Sarah, I learned about addiction science, how it rewires the brain, how shame feeds it, how families like mine turn dysfunction into ritual. I began to see my childhood for what it was. Not bonding, not culture, but generational poisoning wrapped in laughter and denial. For years, I had blamed myself for not fitting in, for being too uptight, when all along I had been the only one trying to stay afloat. I started running marathons that winter. At first, it was therapy, putting one foot in front of the other until the noise in my head went quiet. But then it became something more. My body, once tense from fear and pretense, began to heal. Every mile I ran felt like another link breaking from the chain of my past. I woke up early, trained hard, ate clean. My skin cleared, my lungs expanded, my mind sharpened. By sophomore year, I was clear-headed, strong, and finally happy. I joined study groups, volunteered at a counseling hotline, and even laughed freely, real laughter, the kind that didn't end in guilt. For the first time, I believed I was building a future that wasn't cursed. Then came winter break of 2025, and my fatal dose of optimism. I thought I was ready to face them. I packed a box of non-alcoholic beer, printed photos of my sober friends, and told Sarah, maybe they just need to see there's another way. She gave me a look I'll never forget, half worry, half pity, and said softly, "Just be careful, Em." I wasn't. When I stepped through the front door of our house in Willow Creek, the same old smell hit me, bourbon, cigarettes, and the faint sweetness of denial. Dad's face lit up with pride. "There's my college party girl," he boomed, immediately shoving a beer into my hand. The cold compressed against my palm felt like a test. I smiled gently, trying to keep the peace. "I can't, Dad. Marathon training." Mom's smile evaporated instantly. Her eyes narrowed, voice dripping with disdain. "Oh, look at her," she sneered. "Too good for us now." Dad chuckled, but it wasn't friendly. "College really turned you soft, huh?" I tried to change the subject, asked about the store, about Ethan, but it didn't matter. They smelled defiance, and in our family, defiance was betrayal. As the evening dragged on, the tension thickened. The house glowed with Christmas lights, but the warmth was hollow. Ethan was already halfway gone, slouched in the armchair, a beer dangling from his fingers. Every time I caught his eye, he looked away. When I tried to retreat to my old room, Mom followed, a bottle of tequila in hand. Her voice had that dangerous edge, the one I remembered from childhood fights. "You're not ruining Christmas with your holier-than-thou nonsense," she snapped. I froze. "Mom, please." But Dad was right behind her, his heavy footsteps echoing through the hallway. "Come on, Em. Just one drink. Family tradition." I shook my head, stepping back, heart pounding. I said no. What happened next still feels like a nightmare I can't wake from. Dad's expression darkened. He grabbed my wrists, his grip vice-like. Mom uncapped the bottle, tequila fumes stinging my nose. "You think you're better than us," she hissed. "Let's see how long that lasts." I twisted, begged, cried. But they laughed as if it were some sick joke. Dad pinned my arms while Mom pressed the bottle to my lips. I clenched my jaw until my teeth ached. Then Dad clamped my nose shut, cutting off my air. My lungs burned, panic clawing at my throat. When I finally gasped, the tequila poured in, burning like fire as it slid down. I vomited instantly, coughing and choking. They stepped back, laughing hysterically. "Out of practice," Dad said, wiping his hands. For the next hour they kept trying, refilling, coaxing, taunting. "One more shot, Emma. For the family." I fought, screamed, kicked, but it was useless. Ethan stood in the doorway watching, swaying on his feet, eyes glassy. I called his name once. "Ethan, please." But he just shook his head, whispering, "Don't make it worse." Something inside me broke, so I went still. I pretended to pass out. They laughed again, thinking they'd won, and eventually staggered out of my room. Through the crack of my bedroom door I recorded their voices, mocking me, joking about how they'd break me back in. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. When the laughter faded, I crawled to my closet, closed the door, and dialed 911. My whisper was barely audible. "Please, they tried to force me to drink. I'm scared." 15 minutes later, I saw the flicker of red and blue lights through my window. Tires crunched against the icy driveway. Sirens cut through the silence of our little street. I heard Mom gasp, "Robert." "Oh my God." Dad cursed under his breath. "Just follow my lead." When the officers stepped inside, Mom dropped the bottle. It shattered across the floor, tequila pooling at her feet. Dad's face transformed instantly, his salesman's smile sliding into place like a mask. "Evening, officers," he said smoothly. "Just a family night. Bit of a misunderstanding." I stumbled out of my room, vomit staining my Oregon State hoodie, throat raw from bile and crying. The air smelled of alcohol and broken glass. The officers exchanged glances and separated us for statements. My voice trembled as I explained everything, the bottle, the choking, the laughter. But when they went to my parents, the lies began. Mom's tone turned syrupy sweet. "She's not well," she said. "She's been drinking alone, having episodes. We've been worried." Dad nodded solemnly. "Ever since college, she's been troubled. You know how stress gets to young people these days." For a moment, I thought they might actually get away with it, until I showed the officers my phone. The video played softly in the tense silence. Their laughter, their taunts, the sound of me crying. Still, my parents' lawyer, Uncle Greg, showed up within the hour. A 50-year-old divorce attorney and Dad's oldest drinking buddy. He walked in smelling of cologne and bourbon. With a rehearsed sigh, he handed the officers old medical forms from when I was 16. Notes from a family doctor who once wrote that I was exhibiting anxiety and paranoia after refusing to drink at Thanksgiving. "She's been fragile," Greg said, shaking his head. "This isn't the first time she's made up stories." I sat there, shaking, my throat raw, my heart pounding. Watching him twist my truth into insanity felt worse than the assault itself. Because in that moment I realized they'd spent years preparing for this, building a version of me the world would never believe. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if even the truth would save me. The police hesitated. Their eyes darted between me. Shaking, tear-stained, clutching my phone, and my parents, calm and composed, standing beneath the soft hum of Christmas lights. It was my word against theirs. At the station, things only got worse. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I sat alone in a cold interrogation room, fingers trembling around a paper cup of water I couldn't drink. My phone vibrated constantly in my pocket. When they finally returned it, I wished they hadn't. Text after text flooded my screen. "Traitor. Get help. You've embarrassed this family." All from people I once called family. Then I saw it, Mom's Facebook post. It had already gone viral across Willow Creek. She'd uploaded a smiling photo of her and Dad captioned, "Please pray for our daughter Emma. She's been struggling with mental health and addiction. And last night, she had a breakdown and called the police on us. We love her and hope she gets the help she needs." Thousands of likes. Hundreds of comments. People I'd grown up with offering prayers and sympathy to them. Even my old math teacher, Mrs. Keller, wrote, "Always knew something was off about her. Such a shame." It was like watching a funeral for my reputation. Then came Uncle Greg, storming into the station in his tailored suit and condescending smile. He pulled me aside, voice dripping with authority. "You think this is brave? It's pathetic," he hissed. "You've humiliated your parents. They paid for your tuition, your rent, your phone, and now you're done. I'll make sure every cent stops today." By the time he was done, I felt like a child again, small, voiceless, cornered. The next morning I checked my bank account. My main account, the one my parents funded, was emptied. The $4,000 I had saved was gone. Only $500 remained, tucked away in a secondary account from my part-time coffee shop job. It was all I had left, $500 and a story no one believed. Then came the news about Ethan. He'd been hospitalized, liver failing after years of abuse. My mother's post framed it as a medical crisis worsened by Emma's drama. His girlfriend, Lily Parker, a nurse at the hospital, called me once, just to say coldly, "Haven't you done enough?" But that same night, I got a text from an unknown number. "Jake Bartender, don't trust the story. Ethan's been coming to AA for 3 months. He hid it from them. Said he wanted out. Check on him." I didn't hesitate. I drove to the hospital, heart pounding. When I saw Ethan, I barely recognized him. His skin had turned a yellow-green. His frame skeletal beneath the sheets. The smell of antiseptic filled the room. Machines beeped steadily, rhythmically. His body fighting a battle he might not win. He looked at me with glassy eyes and whispered, "They brought me Biram. Said it would help with the shakes." His voice broke. I told them I was done, but they wouldn't listen. I reached for his hand. It felt fragile, like holding paper. "Ethan, you have to tell them the truth," I said. "We can fix this. We can stop them." He shook his head weakly. "It's too late for me. But you still have to fight." He swallowed, wincing, then whispered, "There's a box. Under my bed. Journals, medical reports, videos. Everything. Use it." His breath rattled as he leaned back. "I'm dying, Emma. Don't let them bury me as a drunk." I promised him I wouldn't. But fate wasn't done yet. 2 days later, police showed up at my motel, where I'd been staying under my own name. I opened the door, expecting questions about Ethan. Instead, one officer said flatly, "Emma Carter? You're coming with us." "Why?" I stammered. "Emergency psychiatric hold," he replied. "Filed by your parents." My blood ran cold. They showed me the paperwork signed by a local judge. Judge Hamilton, my dad's bowling buddy. The same man who'd given me a scholarship award in high school, shaking my hand and calling me a bright young lady. I tried to protest, but it didn't matter. My wrists were cuffed. I was placed in the back of a police car. Sirens off this time, lights reflecting silently across my window. They took me to a psychiatric facility an hour away. A place that smelled of bleach and hopelessness. The walls were white, the beds metal, the staff polite but distant. They stripped me of my phone, my shoelaces, my dignity. Inside, every word I said was twisted against me. When I told them my parents had assaulted me, they called it paranoia. When I explained the family bonding nights, they said I was fixated on delusions of abuse. My marathon training, the one thing that had saved me, was labeled obsessive behavior. My sober support group was deemed a cult of codependence. Then came the final insult. My parents had submitted my teenage journals, scribbles of anger and sadness from when I was 16, as evidence of mental instability. Pages filled with words like "I hate them," "I can't breathe here, I want to disappear." Normal teenage anguish now weaponized against me. For 72 hours I was trapped. Time blurred. Meals came and went. Nurses checked vitals. I stared at the ceiling, wondering if this was how they'd finally silence me. By convincing the world I was crazy. Then, on the third day, a miracle walked through the door. Her name was Dr. Elena Ruiz, our old neighbor, and our physician who had treated Ethan countless times for accidents. She looked furious. "I brought something," she said, placing a flash drive on the psychiatrist's desk. It contained security footage from the hospital and from her own home's porch camera. My parents stumbling drunk, Ethan collapsing, Dad screaming threats at a delivery driver. It was undeniable. At the same time, my sober group, my coffee shop boss, and my academic advisor all called the facility, confirming my stability, my grades, my integrity. They said I was level-headed, responsible, and never once showed signs of delusion. The psychiatrist overseeing my case, Dr. Patel, a 30-year-old resident with tired eyes, reviewed the evidence. He came to my room quietly that evening and said, "Emma, you're free to go." I blinked, unsure I'd heard right. He continued softly, "But be careful. Your parents are still your medical proxies. They have influence. Don't go home." Not yet. When I stepped outside, the cold air hit my skin like baptism. I had no home, no savings, and no family left, but I was free. That night, I went straight to the hospital. Ethan's condition had worsened. Machines hissed and beeped in rhythm with his fragile breaths. Tubes snaked around his body like chains. I took his hand, tears burning my eyes. "I got out," I whispered. "You were right. I have to fight." His lips trembled into a faint smile. "Good, now finish it." The monitors beeped steadily beside him, the only sound in the sterile fluorescent room. And as I sat there holding his fading pulse in my hands, I understood what freedom really meant. Not escape, but the courage to face the darkness and refuse to let it win. Lily's hands trembled as she clutched the clipboard. Her voice, once sharp and defensive, now cracked. "We got married," she whispered. "Ethan made me his medical proxy." The room fell silent. My parents stood near the hospital bed, their voices dripping with false concern, pressuring Ethan to sign over his medical decisions again. My father's tone was firm, manipulative. "You can't trust Emma, son. She's unstable. Let us handle this." I burst through the doorway, my heart pounding, clutching the USB drive Ethan had given me. "No more lies," I said, my voice shaking but steady. Dr. Ruiz, pretending to review Ethan's vitals, subtly nodded at me. "Everyone out," she ordered, her authority unquestionable. Once the door closed, we plugged the USB into her laptop. The room filled with Ethan's recorded videos. Dad forcing shots into his trembling hands, Mom laughing as he gagged. The broken bottles scattered on our kitchen floor. The hospital's patient advocate and psychiatrist watched in stunned silence. Years of abuse, captured in Ethan's shaky voice and grainy footage, painted the truth no one wanted to see. Within hours, Adult Protective Services arrived. Ethan was moved to a private recovery room and finally placed on the transplant list. For the first time in my life, it felt like justice might actually exist. But my parents weren't done. Uncle Greg stormed in with a court order, dragging behind him one of Dad's old golf buddies, a local judge. They claimed I was manipulating Ethan for financial gain, painting me as a scheming addict who'd stolen family evidence. It was like being 16 again, accused and silenced. Then a miracle unfolded. 3 parents, Mrs. Larson, Mr. Patel, and Mrs. Gomez, stepped forward. They were parents from other bonding night families, people I hadn't seen in years. Their faces carried decades of guilt. "Our kids went through the same thing," Mrs. Larson said softly, rolling up her sleeves to reveal faint scars where her son had once been bruised. Mr. Patel admitted to secret Al-Anon meetings, his eyes welling with shame. "We thought it was just us," he said. "Your courage gave us the push to speak." The judge froze, realizing the walls were closing in. The hospital administrator ordered extra security as the press began to swarm outside. Reporters were already catching wind of a drinking cult culture in Willow Creek. Then Ethan's monitor alarmed sharp, fast, terrifying. Nurses rushed in. His oxygen dropped. His skin turned ashen. "We're losing him," someone shouted. I froze helpless. Lily, tears streaming, whispered, "He made me his proxy, Emma. You decide." My voice broke as I nodded. "Do it. Save him." Ethan was rushed into transplant surgery. 8 hours later, the surgeon appeared, exhausted but smiling. "It was successful," he said. "Your brother's going to make it." The legal storm didn't end there. My parents, released from their own brief psychiatric evaluation, filed lawsuits against the hospital, Dr. Ruiz, and even me. But the evidence was overwhelming. Videos, medical records, testimonies, and other families' confessions. The district attorney, untied from their social web, brought formal charges: child endangerment, assault, and obstruction of justice. The trial shattered Willow Creek's silence. People whispered in grocery aisles. The Carter family legacy became a cautionary tale. My parents were convicted and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Their hardware store closed. Their reputation ruined. But I didn't celebrate, I just exhaled for the first time in years. The aftermath was slow healing. I returned to Oregon State, piecing my life back together with financial aid and 3 part-time jobs. Coffee shop in the mornings, tutoring by afternoon, and shelving books in the library at night. My professors extended deadlines. My body, once sharp and disciplined from marathon training, grew tired but determined. I ran again, not for medals but for peace. Ethan spent months in rehab, then took a job at a recovery center, counseling teens who reminded him of us. Lily gave birth to their daughter, Ava, a bright-eyed baby with Ethan's quiet smile. He vowed she'd never know what a hangover felt like, that she'd grow up in a home filled with laughter, not bottles. Back in Willow Creek, things began to change. The neighbors who once toasted my parents now whispered apologies. The local bar banned my family name from their registry. Even Mia's father, the same man who once beat her after a CPS call, filed charges for past abuse, his voice shaking as he admitted he didn't want to die with that guilt. By spring 2026, I stood at the starting line of my marathon. My pace was slower, my lungs weaker, but my spirit was lighter. As I crossed the finish line, sweat mixing with tears, I thought of Ava, her small hands, her laughter untainted by the past. Ethan texted from his AA convention, "Proud of you, sis. You broke the curse." We lost our family, our inheritance, and a town's approval. But Ethan was alive. Ava was safe. And for the first time, the Carter name meant something other than shame. Looking back, I realize freedom has a price: loneliness, exhaustion, and scars no one sees. But breaking this cycle, that's worth every sleepless night. Because now in our family, love is sober. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Somewhere out there, a young person trapped in silence might hear it and find the courage to break their own cycle.